Everybody, my name is Chris Enriquez. Welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. Thank you so much to St. Vitus for letting me do my web series on their channel. Thanks to everybody who's been supporting and watching every night, Monday through Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And if you missed any episodes and you want to watch any past ones, you could go on my YouTube channel. Go on YouTube and look up Christopher Enriquez to watch older episodes, and you could also go to the Revolver Magazine YouTube channel to watch older episodes as well. Tonight, my special guest is Misha from Periphery, one of the most prolific and technical bands out there today, hailed as pioneers of the djent genre. I have so many questions for him. I'm sure you do too. This is going to be a really exciting episode. I think that he's requested to join me, so I'm going to get him on the screen, and we're going to get this started. Thanks again for spending your evening with me tonight, everybody. Hey, Misha, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Very good, very good. Thanks for making time to chat with me on the St. Vitus channel. Welcome to the Age of Quarantine.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's a real pleasure.
Hey, no worries, man. It's our pleasure. I don't know if you remember me. I'm sure you've met a lot of people. I work at Revolver Magazine, and we had it's funny, we had a night that I don't even remember. And it came back to me in the form of a photo that was, I think, either Frank Godlow or Rob Pasbani from Metal Injection. And it's me and you and the two of those guys at NAMM in an elevator coming downstairs from some kind of party we were having. And I was just fucking gone. But it's us in the elevator together.
If it's from NAMM, I don't remember anything. NAMM's always a blur. As I'm sure it is for you too.
Absolutely.
Whether it's from alcohol or sensory overload, it's just it's a bit much, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I was going to say, there might be one thing that could refresh your memory, which is that Eddie from Suicide Silence was in that elevator with us. I don't know if that rings a bell.
What year was this?
It must have been 2018 or 2017.
Man, I wonder if I was drunk. I mean, I remember seeing those guys at NAMM every year. I'm sure we met, and I'm really sorry for not having a clearer memory of it.
Dude,
but as I said, NAMM is special.
It really is. It absolutely is. And you know what? So are you.
Thanks. That's what my parents say. So it must be true.
Well, if you weren't special, I wouldn't have you here talking to me for the next hour. One thing I'd like to. Yeah, man. Well, we all know you're special. Everyone that's watching is leaving hearts for you and leaving comments.
Look at this. I thought we were just gonna do like a little interview chat, and now I'm getting compliments. This can't stop. I'm gonna need this for the next hour. Just affirmation and all that.
Hey, man, that's what we're here for. We started this show to make people smile, including our guests.
Awesome.
So, one thing I'll tell you is that when people say, "What are you going to tell us your life story?" like in a mean way, that would not apply to this conversation. I want you to tell me your life story, so we're going to get into it.
All right. Well, when a man loves a woman, no, just joking.
Real quick, I'm going to say something to the audience. I see we have a large audience. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Age of Quarantine. And if you have any questions, please leave your questions in the question mark box. At about half past the hour, I will get to your questions. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of stuff about gear and pedals and time signatures. I'm ready for it. But just do me a favor and leave them in the question mark box, because I can't read through all the comments. It's very difficult. Let's start with this, Misha. How have you been managing to get through this crazy pandemic situation?
So I'd say I've been pretty fortunate. I'm very grateful because, I mean, if anything, I've been busy, been pretty busy. I've seen sort of both sides. I'd imagine the same is probably true for you as well. You've probably been busier than you'd imagine. Everyone's sort of scrambling and trying to make the most of their time, and I'm certainly doing the same thing. So I've been using this time to focus a lot on the businesses. Obviously, all our tours were just canceled, and we had some really cool things lined up. Some things announced, some things that weren't announced, and I can't really talk about. But unfortunately, we had like one of possibly the coolest tours that we would have ever done. It would have been a bucket list tour. So it's a bit of a shame to lose out on that. One can only hope that after things sort of return or touring it gets restored, that maybe that'll be on the table, knock on wood. But yeah, so in light of that, we've been kind of focusing on the stuff that we can do at home. Like I've been focusing a lot on my businesses, Get Good Drums and Horizon Devices. Been working on music. I've been releasing the bulb material, which that was actually a bit of fortuitous timing, if I'm honest, because you probably know how long it takes to actually release something. Like, you know, you have to plan like 3 or 4 months in advance. So that just kind of worked out to my advantage. But I'm actually going to be starting my solo album this week. Like, I'm just trying to keep the schedule full, you know, and not really allow anything to stagnate.
That's yeah. I mean, you keep busy whether it's the pandemic or not, and that's really cool that it's inspired you to pursue the businesses a little more, and also your solo record. I mean, this is a time for creativity, I guess, right? Well, we have that time. Can you?
Yes and no, because I had projects get sort of put on hold. Like I was working on the new Animals as Leaders with Tosin and the guys. And they hired me to write, like, you know, 5 songs with them. And 4.5 songs in, we couldn't hang out anymore. So, you know, anything. And I was going to work on New Haunted Shores with Mark. I was going to finish this project called Omnom with my buddy Elliot. I had all these things on the docket. I'd planned on this year being a very creative year because I felt like the last couple of years had been more business and less creative. So I kind of wanted to make up for it. And all those things fell through. So.
I feel you, man. It's fucking terrible. My band Spotlights, we're about to do our first arena tour with Korn, and it's completely canceled. We work with Monica too, which was why it was easy to get this done, but it was completely canceled. It's not even rescheduled. Yeah. It's just fucking canceled, so it sucks.
Ironically, the bigger the tour, the faster it was getting canceled, you know?
Right. It's that whole thing. We don't have to get into too much, but I guess, you know, like the problem is these big organizations like Live Nation, they can't guarantee the same kind of money in 2021 that they would guarantee in 2020, you know? So it's a damn shame. I hope you guys get back out there. I know the fans are dying to see you play. God, this is the most questions that this is episode 103 or 104, and you can't see this, but these are the most questions that I'm seeing accumulate. So I'm just going to get into it.
I apologize.
No. This is good. This is a conversation. Misha, take me back. When did music enter your life? And feel free to answer that and elaborate in any way that you feel.
Sure. So I had a bit of a late start to sort of what you call contemporary music. I think when I was really young, my mom identified that I had a musical ear because I think we were at, like the story goes, we were at a friend's house. I was like 4 years old, and I was playing on their piano, and I think I figured out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star by ear, and like they clicked. I think my mom told me, you know, my mom came from a rather poor family, so like she'd always wanted to play, I think, the violin, and they just never had money for that. So I think she vicariously wanted to live through me, or just wanted to encourage the musical stuff. So she got me piano lessons, which was like the last thing I wanted, because I always kind of wanted to learn guitar or drums or something like that, and they were like, no way, especially not drums. They're like, there's no way. And guitar, they were just like, nah, you're just gonna do piano. So I did piano lessons, which I honestly hated at the time. Didn't take it very seriously. I'd say like around the time I was like 10 years old was probably the most serious I ever took it. I had a pretty good teacher at the time, but I kind of forgot most of that stuff. At that point in time, you know, I was learning some music theory and like doing solfege and all that kind of stuff. But because it was work and because I hated doing it, like it wasn't something I enjoyed. It was something that I had to do, and I had to like practice 30 minutes of piano if I wanted to watch 30 minutes of TV. I kind of resented it, and I just like, I don't know, like when you study for like a math test or something or any sort of test, kind of cram, and then as soon as you don't need that knowledge, you just sort of like let it evacuate from your brain. So unfortunately, I didn't retain most or any of that, but you know, that's I suppose the difference between wanting to learn something actively and being forced to learn something. But she was always like, you know, you'll thank me later, and you know, to some degree, I could still find my way around a piano. So I am grateful for that. She was right in the end. Parents usually are, but you know, after that, I'm the oldest, so I have a brother and sister, and I didn't have anyone to sort of show me the ropes with music or whatever. So I think I was like really into like Michael Jackson and like classical music when I was growing up. And I remember we had a family friend visiting us from Australia. And, you know, this is back when, I don't know if all the viewers here will know what a CD is, but music used to come on these CDs. So you remember those, like, how, like, you used to travel? It would almost be like your identity is like your folder of CDs. And you could, like, judge a person based off what they had in it.
How old are you, Misha?
So I'm 35.
Okay, I'm not too far. I'm 39. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always talk about that. I'm just like, you know that we have to fucking pull over sometimes and pop the trunk and get a bunch of fucking CDs out of the fucking, you know, the mirror, and then go put them in the back of the trunk so that we can have
or
like
the six CDs you kept in your CD changer if your car was lucky enough to have those. Like, that said a lot about you right there. Those are like the permanent rotation, you know, or extended rotation.
Quick, Misha. Guys, I see you're leaving a lot of comments, and I see some of them. They're great. Some of them are questions. Just do me a favor and leave them in the question mark box, and then we'll get to those. I just don't want. I want to get to all of them. So, but yes. So you were saying. So with all that being said, what were the first bands or musicians that had some kind of impact on you?
So yeah, that guy who was a family friend, he showed me like Nirvana and The Offspring and stuff like that. And I remember at the time, I didn't know how to quite vocalize it, but I wanted to hear something heavier, but I didn't really have the words, right? I was like, this is really cool. Do you have anything louder? And he was like, oh, here's AC/DC. They're the loudest band in the world. I'm like, no, it's not quite what I mean, you know? And then when I went to school, I made some friends with some guys who were into like new metal. New metal was pretty big then. So it was like Korn and Sepultura and a lot of that stuff. And that's when I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. I've never heard anything quite like this. I'd say that those were the sort of gateway drugs right there. You know, had that whole sort of new metal phase, which then sort of took me. There's some certain bands that, because I'll say, like, as much as I acknowledge that new metal was something that I was into at that point in time, I'd say that most of that stuff didn't really age well for me. Like, it's not stuff I listen to now, with the exception of like Deftones. You know, like Deftones is still the sickest. They transcended. They transcended everything, and I became obsessed with Deftones, and I really started to get into Tool like around the Lateralis era, and stuff, and like Incubus with like Make Yourself and all that. And then also I had a friend who showed me Dream Theater, and that was a game changer. It was like, oh, I didn't know you could do this. Like, I didn't know you were allowed to able to do this, you know?
It makes complete sense. Yeah, I mean, like, just like going back in your catalog, these reference points that you're bringing up, obviously. Yeah.
Well, and then the next reference point would be the most obvious, because I remember I was in college and like I was telling someone like, yeah, like, you know, I really like Meshuggah and Fear Factory and stuff like that, you know, the kind of or no, they were telling me to check out Meshuggah. They're just saying Meshuggah is what they introduced me to. They were like, oh, if you like Slipknot and Fear Factory, you'll love Meshuggah. It's like It's like more like that, but more complicated. I remember hearing Meshuggah and being like, this is noise. This sucks, you know? And my friend was like, oh yeah, Meshuggah, isn't that band that just plays in 4/4 the whole time? And I was like, no, dude, you're thinking of a different band. This band's just like randomness. He's like, no, that's the thing. Like, that's the trick, is that it is actually all 4/4. And I listened to it again and everything clicked. And I was like, well, this is just became my favorite band. And here we are now. You know, that's basically the story of my, my music.
Well, we'll have to dive into that, because that's a huge part of your life, talking about Meshuggah and the roots of your band. But while we're on the topic of your upbringing, you're from Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Right. And did the local scene? You know, obviously, I think you and I were even though we're a bit old. I don't want to say we're old, but we weren't around for the '80s DC stuff. That was a huge part of my life. But did the DC scene have a big impact on you in any way whatsoever?
So it's interesting. But, well, first of all, you know, I say DC, but I lived in Bethesda, Maryland, so it's like one of the suburbs of DC. I was born in DC, but we moved to Bethesda, and that was kind of where I was born and raised. And so that's like the Maryland scene, which was non-existent. And I guess the closest two scenes really were like for metal and for stuff like that were really like Baltimore and Northern Virginia. And the truth is there wasn't really a strong scene. Like, yes, there are bands that came out of it, but like having toured now and having gone to other cities and lived in other places, it's like there really wasn't a scene there. But I think that was a little bit of an advantage, you know? It's kind of, you could be like a bigger fish in a small pond a lot easier and then go on tour. And like, I always give the example of like the first time that we ever played a show in LA was packed, you know?
Sure.
We didn't have to work through the LA scene. We worked through the Maryland scene, which was fairly easy to stand out in because there just wasn't that much of a scene. As opposed to if we had been the exact same band starting out in LA, we probably would have gotten lost in the noise. So
that's a good
I think
point.
That's how that scene sort of benefited us by a complete lack of any scene.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's true also because you can get lost in the shuffle if you're, let's say, a grunge band in the 90s and you're competing against these 5 gigantic bands. You're not going to stand out as much, just like if you were, you know, a glam metal band in the 80s in LA, same thing. So there's something to be said about that, which is interesting. And thanks for clarifying that. I actually just love the Washington, D.C. music scene, but so that was why I was asking. Now, let's talk again, going back to how you learned. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because you're very prolific, and I just kind of want to get to the roots of how you learned how to play, how you came to find your sound and identity, and that kind of thing. Because I think that's where it seems that your fans really seem to be very interested in that sort of like in your story.
Yeah. So you remember the whole like I wanted to play drums and guitar thing?
Yeah.
So I'm Jewish, and you know, when I had my bar mitzvah, that you know you get money, so that's what I spent my money on was a drum set and guitar, which my parents were not very thrilled about, especially the drum set. But
Right.
the drums actually were. But that's where I started. That was really what I wanted to be, was a drummer. And one of the perks of being a drummer, if you remember, when you know band practice usually happens at your place, and then everyone just leaves their gifts. I was jamming with kids in high school, and they were leaving their guitars there. One of the guys was leaving his 7-string there. You know, it was like, so I had access to all this gear that like I didn't have or couldn't afford, just by virtue of being the drummer, which was kind of handy. So I was just kind of putzing around on, you know, just playing whatever. But I kind of was self-taught with all this stuff. That's kind of how my mind works, is that even though it's a much slower process, it's not efficient. I kind of don't always like to read the manual. I just kind of like to jump in and figure it out for myself. I think I'm stubborn like that. It's not anything I would recommend to anyone else because I'm a hypocrite like that. Like I think lessons are probably the way to go, and I would have learned a lot faster, but it's just not how my mind is wired. And it was really with no goal. It was just for the fun of it. Like I just really enjoyed playing and learning and trying to learn my favorite band's songs, you know, trying to cover them as best as I could.
How old were you?
So this is like when I was like, you know, 13, 14, because I had my bar mitzvah when I was 13, so like 13, 14 and on.
You've been
Then
playing
when I
for
went
about
to
21 years.
So, yeah, I guess when you put it that way. God, I should be a lot better. But
Well, I mean, everybody's talking about how you're their favorite guitar player, so I think you're all right.
They're all wrong. But then I went to university. I didn't really know why I was there, but like you know, I couldn't really play drums, so I was like, okay, I'll focus on guitar. And I got really obsessed with Dream Theater at that point in time. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just try to be the best guitarist. I was like, John Petrucci's the best guitarist. I'm just gonna be like him. So I like learned as much Dream Theater and John Petrucci stuff as possible, and I think that helped develop my chops a little bit. You know, got all obsessed with bands like Meshuggah and the Dillinger Escape Plan and stuff like that, and just, you know, was just trying to expand my playing, getting into players like Alan Holdsworth as well and Guthrie Govan and, you know, the like guitarists. So that's where a lot of the influence was coming on, like as I started to become more of a serious guitarist. Yeah, I mean that's basically sort of what planted the seed for what you see now, you know?
Yeah, and the drumming must have helped a lot with the percussiveness of your playing too, I would imagine. Now that's very fascinating that you're self-taught, because it's not, I like most people I know that are self-taught cannot do the types of things that you do, which is probably also what makes your playing special and your songwriting, because it's really just sort of your own thing. It's unique, and I love that. Um, let's talk about your influences for the band, because you mentioned Meshuggah and Dream Theater. I hear, and I could be wrong, but I hear a little Coheed in there a little bit. There's some melodic stuff happening. When you started, first of all, talk about how the band started, and then bring us to the influences and things like that. Let's go there.
Sure. So I started the band when I wanted to quit school, which my parents were not very happy about. But I was just not very happy in school. I was definitely one of those school systems that existed to put you in college. And I was like, I don't even know why I'm here. And I was just skipping classes, like recording. So I was like, look, I'm going to go home. My parents made me a deal. They're like, okay, well, you're not going to be lazy. So we'll rent you a room, in the house, if you hold down a full-time job. And if you're holding down a full-time job, you can do whatever the hell you want in your free time. So you can make that music if you want. But, like, you're not using this as an excuse to be lazy, right? And I was like, that's great. And honestly, that was the happiest I was. I was working at Radio Shack. I could walk to work. I could walk from their place to and from work. So I didn't need a car, pretty low overhead. And I liked my job. I was selling, which I learned how to sell. And it was a commission job. And basically my entire free time, I was just writing music. And I was like, all right, I want to get this band off the ground. So I started Periphery, and I was looking for members. Don't ever do that. It's the worst. Finding members is the worst.
You've been through a lot.
Ever.
You've been through a lot.
Yeah, it takes a very long time, and it took a very long time. It was always sort of this online project. And I guess there were two interesting things happening right as I started. One is, like, computers were becoming powerful enough to where you could record, at home. And I was kind of discovering that. And that was, again, not reading the manual, just kind of going for it. I was like, this is amazing. I can use my gaming computer and make music on it. And I can do it on my own time. I don't need anyone else. So it doesn't matter that, like, I'm, like, working till 3 a.m. in the morning, and, like, I have to work the next day, whatever. Like, it's just my time. So I was definitely taking advantage of that. But also, the internet was kind of like social media, MySpace, and all that stuff was kind of a thing. And I was posting on a lot of forums. I was just posting the music I was posting up. But you have to understand, like, I've always had a bit of a grounded sense of things. Like, even, like, when I spoke to my dad, he was like, look, like, it's great that you're following your dreams. And, like, he could see I was working hard and I was giving it a shot. But he's like, you just have to understand that, like, statistically, you're not going to make it. And I'm like, look, that's fine. Like, this is just more fun than going to school and pretending like I give a shit about, like, philosophy or political science, And I was like, honestly, if I could just work a job and get by and, not even make money off music, but just have that be what I do in my free time, I'm like, that sounds like a pretty good life, at least for the time being. So, my parents were trying to make sure that my future was going to be all right, but I was pretty happy with that setup. But I had no aspirations of, like, I mean, I had aspirations, but I had no delusions of, like, oh, we're going to be in a band, we're going to take over the world or anything like that. It was just like, man, if we could just tour in a van and lose money, I'll be happy,
Yeah, it's something to be said about doing what you love versus being stuck. As musicians, we can all relate to that, where you're like, you'd rather do what you love, make a decent living, or just have fun doing it than get stuck at a job you hate that makes you a bunch of money and you have no time to enjoy your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And now you've talked a little bit about how you got started. Now, as far as the influences, which you did talk about, but, like, when you started the band, what was your idea there? Where you're like, I really want to blend, because you're hailed. You guys have heard it a million times. You're hailed as the pioneers of the djent genre, djents. Maybe you could talk about how you feel about that and sort of merge into, like, what your framework or idea was stylistically when you started this band.
Nothing. It's just having fun. I think people think I'm trying to be original, or they're like, you're just like a Meshuggah ripoff. It's like, that doesn't matter, because I wasn't trying to be original. I was just trying to have fun. Again, as I said, I had, like, the ability to make music by myself, and that was, at that point in time, was a new idea. That was a new thing that you could do. Before you had to go to a studio. or you had to have a studio, have friends. And now I could do it all myself. And I was like, I'm just going to explore this. So, and the gent thing was like a thing that like just happened on the Meshuggah forum. I mean, I didn't even coin the word. That's how Meshuggah describes their palm mutes. And I used to post up clips being like, new genty clip. It was like a tongue-in-cheek thing. But then I think people who weren't in on the joke kind of picked it up, and they thought I was describing the style of music or whatever. And other people started doing it, which just like confused everyone further. So eventually I had to have discussions with people being like, no, it's not a style of music, with people who were pretty certain it was. And you know about arguing on the internet, you're never going to win. So eventually I just gave up. I was like, all right, whatever. Because it doesn't really matter what people call it. The intent is the same, which is just I want to have some fun.
Yeah, that helps anyway when they have a marketing term. It's like, like Nirvana didn't call themselves a grunge band. They
Right.
actually didn't really like, most bands don't like whatever marketing term they get.
Yeah.
Thrown
I think
out.
we've embraced it a bit more. I think there was a point at first where it was like, oh, this is kind of annoying. But then now we've just gone full circle and we embrace it. We printed merch with it. We're in tongue in cheek about it because it doesn't fundamentally change anything. It just, as I said, you can call it whatever you want. If you're enjoying it, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you could say it sounds like pop mallcore, like whatever. I don't care.
Where did the melodicness of the like? I mean, it could just be like that. That was just your own self-expression. But were there specific bands or anything you were into that inspired the more melodic elements of your music?
I'd say I just like melody. Like, I always thought of Periphery as like having my cake and eating it too. It always seems, and this is why I always describe the music myself as like progressive metal, right? Because I knew like metal. I knew I wanted it to be metal. I knew I wanted it to get heavy. But progressive to me seemed like this blanket term that would just allow you to get away with anything. It seemed like a lot of bands, especially back then, were like, oh, this is too heavy. Like, we're not that heavy. I was always talking to people like, yeah, this is, oh, that's too soft. That's too melodic. That's not our style. Oh, this is too heavy. I was like, I don't ever want to have that conversation. I don't want that ever to be a factor in this band. I feel like we should be allowed to go in whatever direction we want to, whatever feels right. So it was really me trying to have my cake and eat it too. So we would have stuff that's super melodic because I enjoyed that. We'd also have stuff that's super heavy because I enjoyed that as well, and everything in between. So that's kind of where that was coming from.
Cool. All right. Well, it's almost half past the hour, so I'll take the questions soon. But before we do that, can you tell us what a typical creative process is like when you're creating your music, specifically for Periphery?
Specifically for Periphery is actually pretty different. It's easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. I get in a room usually with at least Mark and Jake, the other guitarists, and just music starts to happen. Our chemistry is incredible. So it's just, and honestly, the last few Periphery albums have felt more like I'm hanging out with the guys and we're playing video games and being really dumb. And somehow an album materializes behind us,
Right.
And we just kind of trust the process. Like the last album, before we were writing it, we were like, yeah, feeling like we should do something kind of vibey and like maybe not so heavy. And like that totally didn't happen. It ended up being this like kind of heavier, darker thing, But that's just because when we got together, that's just what started to happen. We don't question that. We just kind of, and we always want our albums to be like 8 or 9 songs and 40 or 45 minutes long, and that never works either. Like, for the best of our intentions and plans, like we always fail completely in that sense. But it's, in my opinion, you should just kind of trust the process, especially when the process is good and like you have good chemistry and it feels right. You just kind of follow that thread, and in some ways you almost feel like a passenger. So that's a beautiful thing. It's like when we're doing a Periphery album, it almost feels like I'm just watching this thing materialize in front of me. It never feels like that much work, and it just feels like I'm hanging out with my best friends. So I always have a blast doing it. Absolutely have a blast. Writing solo stuff is much more torturous.
Well, that's amazing. It's cool to hear how much how fun and organic and authentic your friendship with your bandmates and the process of making art together is. I love that. And you're very lucky for that as well. I know so many people are in different situations, but you trust the process, like you said, whether it's You know, in my situation, I trust my singer to write everything because I know he's good at it, and I'm going to do what he asks me to do. Just like, you know, some bands, I would imagine when Dave Grohl's writing the Foo Fighters record, I don't think that anyone's telling him what to do, and that's fine
Right.
because they know what he's doing is cool. But then you get a band like Rush, and you got three guys with chemistry that rip, and it's awesome, you know. And that's kind of probably got more in common with Periphery, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's just like everyone, like none of us are the best at our instrument or anything, but together we're more than the sum of our parts. So it's like I know that, and Spencer and I will work on vocals and what together, and like we have like a shorthand with it. Just happens so quick. Like I would go over to his place for like a couple hours, and we would knock. I don't do lyrics, you know. I'll let him handle that, but we'd knock out like melodies and rhythms and vocal lines for like 3 songs in like a couple hours, and that's just
great.
done. And it's just like it's just so much fun. It's so easy, and you know, Matt trusts me with the drum. I'm usually programming all the drums, and then but you know, Matt will come in and might change stuff. But then I also know that like with the stuff I program, he'll go in the studio and he will make it 10 times better. So there's a lot of trust in the whole process, and it just means that you don't have to second guess anything. You can just kind of enjoy the ride, and it's a great time. If you watch like our documentaries, you can see we're being kind of silly because it really just doesn't feel like that much work at the end of the day. But it's because I got a good group of guys. I really, you know, they're like my best friends, and more importantly, our writing chemistry is really locked in. So
Yeah.
so that's why we kind of get to benefit from that now.
So many member changes until you got the right one, and now you got and then you finally get the right chemistry. All right,
Exactly.
so bear with me, Misha. I have 30 questions that people submitted in a box. And,
Oh boy.
I'm gonna have to go through them as I decide which ones we're gonna try to tackle.
Only the worthy ones.
Yes. I don't even know where to begin. All right, so okay, here we go. I'm just gonna go with this one. Jamsu I don't know how to say some of these people's names. Jamsuwu, is Periphery planning on doing any online live events? Something like Trivium did for their show. So I guess we're talking about quarantine performances. I know a couple of bands did that.
So the big problem, you know, we were kind of discussing that at first, and we were trying to plan something. We wanted to do something like that, but the difficulty, well, like I feel like if we did it, we should do kind of a live stream. Kind of debated whether we should do a pre-recorded thing or a live stream thing. We were like, we should do a live kind of deal, but then that requires all being together. There was a point in time where it looked like things were chilling out, and like we're like, yeah, we'd get on planes or whatever, and then things got way worse. So I don't think anyone's trying to get on planes, and we're also spread out, so it's just a logistical issue. Like I think the bands that have made it work usually live close enough to where they could maybe drive or whatever.
Right.
If
like,
we could make it happen without having to get on planes, I think it would be a lot simpler. Plus, these things take a lot of time to plan. So even if we sort of start planning it now, probably wouldn't be able to get it all together for a couple of months. And it's just like, who knows where things are going to be at in a couple of months. It'd be a shame to do all that planning and then have to cancel it all just because it's like we can't meet, you know, or something came up or whatever. So it's something I'd say we're fortunate enough to not need to do. Like financially, it's not something that we need to do to get by. So we're just going to keep that one in our back pocket for the time being. If it was something that we could do sort of safely, we'd definitely entertain it. But I think just for the time being, we're going to have to wait and see.
All right. Well, looks like you guys might have to wait for the real thing, and it'll be worth it when it happens. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, take another question if I can get this name right. Silas Dive God Mitchell, what's your favorite song out of the Periphery catalog?
Oh man, I always hate like picking Periphery songs. I don't know. I'm pretty proud of Reptile actually. Like I think that song, as I say, like there's songs that you write and that you kind of, I think as you put out more albums and tour more, you get a sense of like what may work well live. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have songs that you think will crush live and they don't, and vice versa. But sometimes you get a song where you're like, man, I have a really good feeling about this, like as a studio song, and it also ends up being like a great live song. And Reptile was that, and that's a very long song as well. So just the fact that it feel like it feels shorter, at least for me performing it, feels shorter than it is. It's got a good flow. So I'm really happy with how that one came together. And that was incidentally the first song we wrote for Periphery 4. It just kind of shows how we were all sort of bursting at the seam with ideas and just kind of ready to go.
All right, there you have it. I got another one here from Jadont. Have you had any profound spiritual experiences that have inspired your music?
Unfortunately not. There's not a whole lot of spiritualism here. It's just boring logic and reason. Boring stuff.
Okay, let's this is a good question. I like this one. This is from Zach's Cult. Misha, did you study science in college prior to Periphery? I've heard you speak about college days. I can't but I myself am a science student. All right, this is a long one. Maybe that's not a great question, but
well, I mean, I can answer it. No, I didn't.
Okay, there you go.
I was not smart enough to do science.
Okay. Okay, let's take this question and then we'll take a break from the fan submitted questions. Maybe we'll get back to it later. But this is actually a question I had.
What's up, Maytab? How'd I get my beard style so perfect? It's my buddy. He's up on here. Business partner. Yeah. Horizon Devices. Yeah. All right. Anyway, sorry. Favorite band?
We got a lot of comments and questions about the beard. We even got a couple that are from people saying you look like Jimmy Fallon. I don't know what that's all about.
I don't know either. But this is called a laziness beard. This is what happens when you don't have to look good for anybody. So just let it grow out and see what happens. Favorite band to tour with? Man, that's tough. There's genuine. And this is not. It sounds like a cop out, but there's so many bands that we love touring with, and you'll generally know because we're always touring with them. So like bands like Contortionist, Veil Maya, Pliny was a blast to tour with. We did 2 tours with them back to back. I'm trying to think. You see, I'm gonna forget a bunch of names, but like honestly, like most of the bands that we tour with are awesome. We make a point of trying to pick bands that we think are really crushing it, and we're kind of strategic with the tours that we accept and whatever. So generally speaking, the bands that we're taking out on like our headliners are because we think they're awesome.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that bleeds into what I was going to say, which is that you've toured with some of your heroes, some of that you've mentioned: Dream Theater, Dillinger, Escape Plan, Fear Factory. Have you toured with Meshuggah?
No, we played like the odd off show with them. I don't know that they'll ever take us out, if I'm honest. Like I get the feeling that they might think it's a little too close to home or a little too weird. And I don't actually hold that against them, because I think that if as much as this is gonna just destroy my life right now, I think if I were Meshuggah, I wouldn't understand why it would make sense to take Periphery on tour, unless just certain things lined up perfect, like logistical and financial things lined up. I just don't know what Periphery would add from like a purely cold and logical side. From the fanboy side, yes, we would be the best band to tour with Meshuggah ever. If we never tour with them, if they never send us an offer, I'll understand why. Like I would never hold that against them.
Have you ever gotten the chance to meet with them or speak to them in any way about the whole story behind how they've influenced you and inspired you?
I mean, like when I'm hanging, we've hung out with them a few times, and like I'm definitely not trying to punish them in those moments. So no, I haven't. I mean, I'm sure they know. I'm sure they know that like I'm obsessed with them. I don't keep that much of a secret, so I'm not trying to like highlight that in the moment. But plus, I don't know. I don't really talk shop like with bands. Like we're usually just hanging out, like kind of shooting the shit,
Right, try to keep it cool. Now, as far as this is a fun question to ask sometimes. As far as like holy shit moments, I mean, you've obviously toured with some amazing bands, played some serious shows. You were nominated for a Grammy. What's like a very notable holy shit moment that you could share with us? Take a second if you need to.
I mean, the fact that we got to tour with Dream Theater was a big that was a big like pinch me moment for sure. because it was, you know, as I said, like in college, I was trying to be John Petrucci. Like
Right.
I wanted to just assimilate him. So that was really, really cool. You know, touring with Deftones was like that as well. Getting to tour with Dillinger was like that as well. And even though we didn't tour with them, like playing a show with Meshuggah was a lot of fun too. Just, you know, like kind of meeting your heroes, I guess, you know, whether it's on tour or on the off show or festival or whatever. There's some moments where you're like, whoa, like this is kind of takes you aback, you know.
Absolutely. Having toured with Deftones and Dillinger, I know exactly what you mean. And those guys specifically are just when you end up in a situation like that with them, they're just like you and me. They're just these fucking rad fucking dudes, and it's like the imposter syndrome starts to goes away, and you're like, oh, you guys are like my friends, you know, which is rad. I love that.
Yeah. I think we've been fortunate to find that most of the bands that we look up to are genuinely good dudes, genuinely good people to tour with. And I think that's because, you know, it's a humbling industry. The road is hard. Like at the end of the day, despite like the fame and like the recognition, it's a pretty brutal job, and there isn't much margin for error or for divas or anything like that.
Right.
So I think you'd actually struggle to get very far if you weren't cool, if that makes sense. Like I think you're seeing more, like I've seen like these bigger bands, like, and they're generally very grounded, because I don't think they would have made it that far if they weren't, you know?
Absolutely. And you're right, because we forget this is such a niche thing. Just playing rock music or heavy music, it's just niche anyway. So, you know, there's no room for, yeah. And then you know, bring in like progressive music into the picture, and then they're talking real niche. You know,
exactly.
Well, I brought up the Grammy nomination. You know, does that mean anything to you? Did you go to the Grammys?
No, we didn't.
Okay. You know,
I mean, no, it was cool. It was cool, but like, I'd say of all the things that like I wanted to do as a musician that wasn't on the list. Don't get me wrong, I'm super grateful. It's cool to get recognized. It was just a nomination, so like we didn't win. I think if we'd won, it would have been like probably more significant. But I guess it's like a nod. It's like it's getting recognition for your work. It's cool, but it's just not. It's something I never necessarily aspired to. So I'll take it. Like I'm really glad. I'm really glad that we did, and it's really cool. But I have to say, in some perverse way, it's almost been this tool for other people to talk about us and other people to brag about us or whatever, or to like pump us up to other people. It's like part of this currency that I don't ever use or really care about that much. So I just don't think about it that much. And you know, I'm a bit more pragmatic. So I'm like, you know, if there's something that happens that makes a tangible difference in our life, then I'm much more interested in that. As far as I can tell, it didn't really do very much for us, so it was just a cool nod, and as that, I think it was cool.
I love the way that you put that, and I couldn't agree with you more. I've never been nominated for a Grammy, but I feel that sort of connection to your attitude, you know, on music in general and why you do it, and just sort of recognizing what these things sort of represent and what they do. Because it's very true. Being in the industry, working at Revolver, these are things that are pitched to us every day, which is like Grammy nominated artist, Grammy nominated, you know, blah blah blah. So it's an accolade. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything, but I just love the way that you put that. And let's go back. At what point? I'm really going back again. I come jumping around a bit, but at what point did you realize that the band was getting national and eventual international recognition? What point did that happen for you?
So I'd say probably like right before and around Periphery 2. The first album, that was a pretty rough time as a band. I think I was so just excited about everything, so excited to just be on the road and play, that I didn't really care that we were playing for nobody and that no one cared about us, and that even when we were playing like these festival shows, that like nobody was paying attention to us or gave a shit. We were always like the bands on tour. We were like the band's band, but never the fans band, you know? And that went on for long enough to where it started to wear at like my hope. I was like, I don't know how many more tours I've got where, you know, we're just struggling to make gas money to the next city. And like, it's a slog. It's hard when you're, you know, driving, performing, selling merch, loading in and out, doing all that stuff every day for 6-7 weeks. That'll really take a toll on you. Luckily, I was younger then, so I had more energy and I was a bit more invincible. Nowadays, I couldn't do that. So, but, you know, we sort of paid our dues with that kind of stuff. And then we started to notice, like, we put out this EP called Icarus EP. It was just sort of like a placeholder between that and the next album. And then around Periphery 2 is when we started to see things really start to accelerate. Because for a while, it felt like, okay, this is it. Like, this is basically, like, we've hit like everything we're going to hit. And to some degree, I was like, you know what? I got what I wanted to get done. Like, I got to tour the country. I got to, you know, do my band tour and, like, you know, do a show that was more, or do a set of shows that was more than like a weekend warrior kind of deal, right? So, I mean, I was a little bummed, but I was also like, you know, if this is it, then I'm still luckier than most. But it started to pick up after that, inexplicably. And from Periphery 2 onward, you know, we started to see a lot of growth.
And the first time you got signed, I'm interested in kind of hearing a little bit about that, because you talked about playing shows where, you know, not many people were coming out, and, you know, the whole band really started out in a very, you know, I don't know if punk rock is the right word, if that was part of your DNA like it was for me, but yeah, it's like you kind of start DIY punk rock style, right? And then you get from A to B and so forth. But talk about the first time the band got signed.
We turned down record deals for 3 years.
Wow.
I knew exactly the kind of record deal that I wanted. And at this point in time, you have to understand, like, especially Periphery 1 is basically like my solo album with vocals on it. Like, okay. I wrote 95% of that stuff. I produced it, I recorded it, engineered, edited, mastered, everything. And then we sourced the artwork ourselves. So, you know, we were going to these labels and they're like, okay, yeah, you're going to do a regular deal. If you remember then, that's when everyone was doing 360 deals. Because CD sales were going down. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm doing a 360 deal, especially given that I put all the work into this, and your only job is just to put this on shelves. Like,
sure.
There's just no way. And they're like, well, what do you want? And I said, I want a licensing deal. And they're like, no one's going to give you a licensing deal. I said, okay, then I won't sign. So we turned down record deals for 3 years while we were waiting for someone to offer us a licensing deal. And everyone said we were going to be crazy. We were talking to Roadrunner at the time, you know, we're talking to Sumerian, who, like, we're still a very small label. I remember telling like Roadrunner, like Monty at Roadrunner, I was like, you know, this band's this label Sumerian seems like they might offer us what we want. And he was like, who? You know?
Right.
And
it's so funny. And shout out to Monty.
Right, yeah. No, he's a good dude. I mean, like, I had some very honest conversations with Monty. I mean, he even admitted, he was like, look, I don't get your style of music. I'm only pursuing you because everyone in my office says I'd be crazy not to sign you guys. But what ended up happening was after 3 years, like, Ash at Sumerian was kind of like, okay, dude, well, what's it going to take? And I was like, you know what it's going to take? It's going to take a licensing deal. So he was like, okay, fine, we'll do your licensing deal. But fun fact, some of you guys who aren't in the industry may not know this, like, record deals will have phrases like in perpetuity and, you know, licensed in the universe. It's not just the world, it's the universe. Just in case we start to colonize other planets, they want their record points, you know?
So silly.
So I had that changed, you know, to the licensing term and to just the U.S. And we negotiated something for Canada. Well, right as that happened, like, Monty hits me up. He's like, okay, so we fucked up. Where can we get you? And we basically, at the time, we signed to Roadrunner basically in every other territory at that point in time. So, you know, that's how that happened. We kind of waited out. It was tough because we weren't touring at that time, and we were kind of watching all of our peers and our friends and bands kind of get signed and start touring and start building up, and we were just sitting around, felt like we were going nowhere fast. But I'll tell you what, we just got our catalog back last year, and we're making all the money off of our music. And that was a damn good call to do that licensing
Wow,
deal.
good for you. Where did you, so many people they just get excited about a record deal and they don't really read between the lines, which is a classic situation. Where did your intuition come from with all this music business stuff?
So, I think I've always been a little bit wary on the business side, like just generally, and kind of maybe, I mean, some people would call it maybe a little cynical, because if ever someone wants to do something with me, I'm always, okay, like, what's your angle? Like, right. I don't think, and maybe it's cold, maybe it's unfair, but I do think that most people are not doing things out of the kindness of their heart. So I'm always just trying to figure out, like, but I do think that you can do good business, if you have mutually beneficial arrangements or something that can actually benefit both sides genuinely. Sometimes you can forge these things that work out. And then I was talking to a lot of bands, a lot of friends were like, yeah, we signed this deal for 7 albums. We're not making any money. I think Victory Records was like notorious for like doing the worst deals for their bands and like signing them for like, just like signing them for life. Like you're better off just breaking up, and like they had terms for that as well. Like it just seemed like a point in time where like record labels were really just trying to nickel and dime everything. And I think because their business model was kind of really getting screwed with by like MP3s and all that kind of stuff, and the lack of CD sales. So they were really trying to get every last red cent that they could out of every band. And I was hearing these stories, and I was hearing like how these deals were getting formed just by asking questions, and they were just telling me all sorts of stuff. I was like, wow, that's terrible. And they're like, yeah, don't ever let them, I was kind of putting together a rolling list of things to look out for in a contract. Like, don't let them do this. Don't let them do that. Don't let them cross your merch streams and record streams to recoup, just a lot of stuff, like little things that they're putting in to kind of make up for the fact that they weren't getting the album income that they were expecting. And they were all built off of business models that didn't make sense, or it didn't make sense for the time. The one thing that Sumerian had going for it is that it was like basically starting in a time where older labels were either like folding or adapting and firing a lot of people so that they could be solvent in a difficult time. And like Ash kind of was opportunistic in the moment, and was able to sort of build his business model around that. So that's why I think he was able to offer us. Like, he was offering 50% royalties. Like, no other label was doing stuff like that.
Yeah, no,
you'd be lucky to get 19% back then,
Right.
Right.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool thing for people to take away from this. And you would be a very good manager of bands, by the way. I don't know if
so our manager is fucking awesome. And I see how hard he works, and I would never in a million years be a manager.
I could just tell talking to you though, if this ever, I want Periphery to exist for as long as possible. But if there's ever a side hustle for you, I see band management in your future.
How about just consulting? I could do consulting. I could just tell bands what to do and not be responsible for them. Bands are the worst.
At the home stretch. We're at the last 7 minutes here before Instagram kicks us off. So I have a few more quick ones for you. But you have a label called 3 Dot. Tell us more about the label.
So after our Sumerian deal was up, we'd known way before that we wanted to kind of do our own label. Because I think a few albums in, we were realizing that like Sumerian was very hands off with us. And I think at one point they were just trying to prove a point, but it didn't really work because our albums were selling well. Because we kind of told them we had a contract where they had no creative control, but there is a bit of a mentality of like, like if you don't do what we say, then we're not going to help you out. And we're like, okay, but then it didn't matter because our album sold well, and it kind of just showed us that like, well, I guess we could just do this ourselves. So it kind of empowered us to want to do our own label after the fact, just as a vessel to put out our own stuff. But then we're like, well, we've got the label. We could put out, projects we believe in if we want to as well. So it's kind of this casual thing where we'll sign projects if we're stoked on them. But the main focus is to put out our side projects, Periphery, all that kind of stuff. Just have a really good vessel, and our manager helps us run it, and he works really hard, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's a great way to maximize the income.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk really quickly about Periphery 4, Hail Satan. Tell us about the writing process, the recording, what the response has been like. That's your latest record.
Yeah. So, I mean, the writing process is like I told you, like we just kind of got together, just saw what happened. We recorded, I tracked the guitars at my place. We re-recorded those for real. Nolly, who used to play bass in the band and kind of produces now, he's got brilliant ear. So I compose the bass parts. I'll send them off to him. He'll track them for real. He also like tracked our drummer playing the drums and then mixed the album. And I don't know. We have a system now that's pretty handy. And I've been composing a lot of the orchestral stuff, orchestral layers and whatever. It's kind of the new thing I've been getting into is like you can have a virtual orchestra on your computer. So I've been diving deep into that, and yeah, it's just been it's really, as I say, it's not hard to make a Periphery album.
Well, it's awesome, man, and I'm sure everybody has been listening to it even more during the quarantine with all the time that we have sitting around. That being said, if you had, this is the difficult question some people skip if they can't do it in 4 minutes, but speaking of albums, if you were stuck in quarantine with 5 albums, what would they be and why?
It's a tough one. I should admit something is I don't listen to a lot of music. Not really. I usually listen to like silencer podcasts. But I've been listening to a lot of Hammock lately. I don't know if you know Hammock.
I don't.
It's really chill music. So here's the thing. It always surprises people is I don't listen to a lot of metal just because I'm surrounded by it. And when you're touring around, you kind of want something else. So yeah, I'd listen to like John Hopkins and like Sigur Rós and Hammock and like just chill stuff like that. Telephone Tel Aviv.
Telephone Tel Aviv and Sigur Rós. But the best concert I ever saw in my life was Sigur Rós and Bjork.
I've never seen them, and everyone I know who's seen Sigur Rós live has said it was life-changing.
Absolutely. We had Telephone Tel Aviv at St. Vitus once. It was great.
Oh, really? Yeah, man. I love Telephone Tel Aviv. But just kind of chill stuff like that. I guess heavy stuff. The only heavy album I listened to recently was Car Bomb. I really love Car Bomb.
Oh, dude, Car Bomb is unbelievable. I know those guys. They're here. They're here in New York. Those guys are unbelievable, and they won't fucking become a full-time band or do anything, which is the biggest shame. So they're just like this like hidden gem that you and I know.
Yeah,
about.
I mean, we took them out on a tour a couple of years back, and they're the best dudes.
Shout out to Greg. I should get him on the show. It's great.
It's like if you took really smart people and were like, here, you should start a band.
Hey, Misha, have you ever gotten this joke? I like this one as far as the pun on words. Misha, what a D-gentleman. That's a good one. I like that.
We get that one, though it's a gentleman. The D is silent.
Okay. Gentleman. Shows how much I know. Well, dude, this has been really awesome. And anybody watching, if you missed any of it, it'll be on the St. Vitus IGTV, and it'll be on the Revolver Magazine YouTube channel within the next week or so. I want to thank you, Misha, for taking the time out today. Do you have any final words or shout-outs or anything you want to let the people know before we say goodbye?
Hail Satan.
There you go. Dude, I really hope I get to see you play live, and you're cool. Everything you do musically and your whole attitude about everything is incredibly refreshing and inspiring. So kudos to you and everything that you do, and thank you again.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take it easy, brother.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for watching, everybody. And to the guy that says I'm a terrible interviewer, start your own fucking show. I do this every night at 8 o'clock. What the fuck are you doing? Anyway, thanks for watching. You guys rule. We'll be back tomorrow with Taking Back Sunday, and then I'll be here the day after with Quicksand, and we'll be here on Friday with Cancer Bats. Lots of good stuff. Take it easy, everybody. Have a nice night. Stay safe. And don't be dicks to each other. What the fuck? Peace.